welcome to Word Vancouver. You're at Writing and Illustrating Kids Books with Quill BC. And just before I introduce our authors, I want to give a huge round of thanks to Word Festival team and volunteers. Couldn't do this without them. They've done a huge amount of work. For the authors that you can see here and all through the festival, you should be able to get those books signed at the Iron Dog table out in the lobby or online. We'd like to start with a land acknowledgement, and we would like to acknowledge that this festival takes place on the unceded homelands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. We'd also like to give a special thank you to SFU and the Writer's Studio for this wonderful space and their continued generous support of Word Vancouver. We have a huge list of amazing donors online at wordvancouver.ca, but we would like to take a moment to thank just a few of them here now: the Canada Arts Council, Canada Book Fund, Canada Heritage Fund, Canada Periodical Fund, the BC Arts Council, Creative BC, City of Vancouver, DBVIA, Yosef Wask Family Foundation, Hammer Foundation, Asian Canadian Writers Workshop, Quill, Pace & Associates, and the list continues. So again, check that out at wordvancouver.ca. And if you haven't already, please consider making a donation or enter the silent auction at wordvancouver.ca. Thanks for your patience. So we are talking about writing and illustrating kids' books today. And this, everyone you see here is from Quill BC. That is the Children's Writers and Illustrators of British Columbia. We're a professional organization that as authors has illustrators of children's books. That's books for ages 0 through to 18. And we're here to hopefully give you some ideas about how you can enter your own publishing journey. So I am the current president, the leader of Quill. I write speculative fiction, that's fantasy, horror, and sci-fi, mostly for older, so upper middle grade, upper YA, and above. And I do a lot of teaching, speaking. I've put together a really broad range of experience. So we've tried to have everybody with different skill sets, different journeys on their publishing path to help you guys get your questions answered. I'm going to start with introductions, and I'll try to go in the right order here. So we have Danielle Marcotte beside me, bilingual author of dual language picture books and early readers chapter books and French language only novels for middle grade through to kind of junior YA. She's a former Radio Canada radio host, and she's joining us from Tsawwassen. So she is here to talk to us about small press and kind of niche publishing, publishing in French and English, or in some cases, French only. Next up, we have Sara. So Sara is a multi-award winning author of 9 books, and she's published picture books through to middle grade, kind of upper middle grade novels. She is also an elementary school teacher, librarian, and she is joining us from Whistler. So I think you get the award for coming the furthest today. And she's a good person to talk to about a more traditional publishing experience in the sort of small to medium range press. We have next up Bryce. He is the co-author and indie publisher of the Littlest Dinosaur picture book series. He also writes for young adults, short fiction, editor-publisher of the Dreadpunk anthology series Dead Steam, designs book covers, teaches creative writing, background as a sound designer, lead writer for video game studios. So he's a good person to talk about indie publishing, both for the littles and for the not so littles. And then we have Claire. Claire is a Vancouver author, illustrator, and designer. So she's our illustrator on the panel. She does have experience in both. She creates children's books, comics, surface designs, murals, maps, and greeting cards. Wrote and illustrated an upcoming debut YA graphic memoir that we're all very excited to see, and a picture book that I think she has on display there, and has also illustrated a number of other picture books. So she wrote and illustrated that one, and she also works as an illustrator for other authors sometimes. So Rhode Island School of Design graduate. She has the chops there. Ask her your illustration questions. So I'm going to ask everybody a few questions, and then I'm going to turn it all over to you, and you can ask your questions about publishing. But to start with, just to give you a little background on everyone, I'd like to know how you came to writing and illustrating, how you first got published. What was that journey like? And let's start from the end with Claire.
Okay, so my journey is a little bit different because my background is as an illustrator, and I graduated with a degree in illustration, and my art school had a picture book class, but I didn't take it because I was trying to be what I thought was a real artist. And it wasn't until after graduation that I realized that my art is really suited towards children and that I love storytelling. So I took a continuing education class at the School of Visual Arts in New York for children's books. And from there, I started writing and illustrating just books to try and pitch to publishers. And I ended up going to a Society of Children's Books Writers and Illustrators conference. And at the end of the conference, they had some submission information. And I submitted to one of the publishers, and they came back to me and they said, "Hey, we'd really like it if you wrote a story about the lobster you have, the illustration of the lobster you have on your website." And I was working on that story, so I kind of went back and forth with them. And then they offered me my book contract. So that's how it got started.
So I've been writing almost 30 years now. I'm in my 30s, but my writing journey started as a kid, just writing stories. And as I grew older, I started getting into writing novels. Didn't really have a lot of experience other than just seeing what worked and trying different things. So I took my Bachelor of Arts degree at the University of Manitoba. And after I finished that, I didn't really know where I was going in life. So I ended up at taking more education, Vancouver Film School, ended up working in the video game industry where I kind of talked my way into a job as a writer. Started out as a sound designer, but convinced them that I could write as well. And when their writer left, I took over. And from then on, I've just been kind of writing whatever I could come up with. So I've written children's books, I've written horror, I've written comic books, video games, just about anything I could come up with. I try writing it and see what works, see what people respond to. So far, the thing that people have been most excited about with my writing has been my children's books, The Littlest Dinosaur, which I wrote with my co-author, Stephen, who's here in the audience. And that's about it.
So I may be an outlier on this one, but growing up, I hated writing and I was all about math and science. And it wasn't until I took an education course in university that really focused on writing that I realized, oh, actually, I enjoy this. And so when I was in my late 20s, I started writing for fun. And then I was walking down the beach one day with my husband when I was 30, and this amazing thing happened. And he said, "You know, you should really write a story about this." And by the time I got home, the idea for my first story that was published into a book, Jake Reynolds' Chicken or Eagle, was sort of formed in my head by the end of that walk. So that was 2002, and Jake Reynolds was published in 2009. So it was a 7-year journey. That same year, actually within 2 weeks, Mountain Machines, which is my indie published picture book, was also published. So kind of started from there, and then I've branched out into a bunch of different kinds of writing since.
So always wanted to write, and actually in my job at Radio-Canada, there was a lot of writing that was involved. But as a mom from the suburbs, there was no time, and I was working downtown, there was no time. So when I took my retirement in 2009, first thing I started to take courses here at SFU, and I am their most convinced students. It was an excellent course, and I cannot say enough about going to find out about the details of the industry. Because we're readers, we all think we know how that industry works. Children's book writing is very, very different than adult writing, and there's a lot of misconceptions going about it. So that was the first thing I did upon retirement, and that was the basis on which everything else was happened, if I may say so. So in my case, I'm a French Canadian born in Quebec, married to a New Brunswicker, living in BC for 50 years, with a son in the Yukon and a daughter in Japan. So I cannot have a straightforward path. They said to me in the courses that it was good to fatten up your resume with writing for magazines. So I did write for the French newspaper, the community English newspapers, for travel magazines online and things like that. And that really gave me confidence and was good on the resume. Then I couldn't place my books that started here at SFU. It was one of my assignments in 2009. And I was not able to place it anywhere. So I started to self-publish on Kindle. It's for free. But rather than paying for books that are physical and that you store in your garage, because nobody wants to take your books. It's very difficult when you are an indie mom my age in the burbs. So instead I paid an illustrator so that my book that was online only, that you could only buy in virtual world, was beautifully illustrated. And that became my calling card, because then I could show my potential publishers what I was presenting to them, what it could look like. It could look like these first three that I self-published, Kindle only online. So that was my journey, and it became that. Two publishers started me up, and now I have eight different publishers across Canada. But that is another story. How do you address that quest? And again, it's a long quest between the fact that you write and the fact that you publish.
Okay, well, I promise I didn't seed this room with all indies intentionally. I brought Bryce in to speak to that, and that's some of my background as well. And it turns out that just about everybody is going down that path at some point in their career. So make of that what you will. I started writing quite seriously in kind of that middle school to high school transition, had some very supportive teachers, won a few sort of smallish contests, and thought I was amazing, of course. And so I was going to be a novelist. But my practical, dramatic mother said that I needed a day job, which was a reasonable thing for a mother to do. And so I went to university, got a career started, had no time for writing, realized that there was nowhere to go in my career and I didn't like it anyways. Left that and went, okay, well, now I'm going back to plan A because I have the time, and my family very sensibly asked me to think about what I wanted to do, which I didn't think was something I was allowed to ask myself. That was about 2015. And so I spent 2-3 years writing a book, flailing, trying to figure out what to do with it. And I appreciate what you said about learning the children's publishing industry, because that is something that I neglected to start out with. I was going off of information that was 5-10 years old, thinking that I knew what I was getting into, not realizing that the industry had moved on, the trends had changed, the financial situation had changed. And so that, as we'll get into in the next part, is a strong tip for all of you, is study where the industry is at now. Even if that's not, if you're not a really business-focused author, study where it is now, because you need to make choices that are good for you and good for whatever your priorities are. So I indie published my first book. I've indie published now the full trilogy. I have done a lot of, again, the short fiction, magazines, anthologies, so that's been really good. This did, in a sense, become that calling card. I'm the president of Quill now. I've been teaching creative writing with the extracurricular organization for a few years now. So it's been a strong start. Another thing about publishing that I think we'll all tell you at some point or another is it is long, slow, and there's a lot of luck involved. So the starting line is getting good at your craft, understanding the business, but to really kind of break through into the type of success you might dream of, it does take luck and kind of that confluence of factors. So next staged question that we're going to hand out before we open it up to the rest of you is, what is one thing each of you wish you'd known or recommend, some advice for our aspiring authors and or illustrators in the crowd? And again, we'll start with Claire.
Okay, so I'm just going to talk about my path a little bit, what really helped me early on. So I'm going to mention two things. Hope that's okay. The first thing I want to recommend is the Society of Children's Books Writers and Illustrators, or SCBWI. That's how I really got started with learning more about the children's book industry and learning, how it all works and how to approach submitting to publishers and everything. And then the second tip I would recommend is get a critique group. So that's just, maybe just a couple friends who also like to write and or illustrate, and get together every so often. When I was first starting out, I had a critique group and we met once a week. And that was really helpful because you get feedback on your work, but it also kind of gives you a deadline. You're like, oh man, I have to work on this because we're meeting again on Thursday and I have to have something to show. So so STBWI and a critique group.
I guess the biggest piece of advice I can give, just don't be afraid to put yourself out there, put your books out there for people to read. I've spent a lot of time writing novels, writing different short stories that have collected dust on my computer and have never seen the light of day. Like I said, I've been writing for 30 years, but I haven't really started publishing until the last 5 or 6. And it's only since I started publishing that people have started to read my work. Go figure. So don't let your work collect dust. Just get it out there. It's so easy to put your work out there these days. Like Danielle was mentioning, Kindle, you can publish your work for free now. You can just go online, go to kdp.amazon.com and upload what you've written, and people might start buying it. It is a lot of luck, and it is important to focus on the craft as well. But if you're not actually hitting the publish button at some point, no one's going to be reading what you're writing.
We perhaps should have discussed what we were going to answer for this question. No, I was going to talk about critique groups. But I think I want to focus on craft and how important it is to be prepared to rewrite and rewrite and rewrite, and that potentially your first published book is actually your third book that you write, or your second, so the book I was referencing, Jake Reynolds' Chicken or Eagle, I wrote within 6 months, the first draft of it. I had a 6-month-old at the time, and every time he went for his nap, I would go make myself write 2 pages. I desperately wanted to go have a nap, but I wrote my 2 pages first, and then I moved on. But there is only one chapter in that book that is the same in the published book from that first draft that I wrote. So almost the entire book was rewritten. And so yes, it was the first book I wrote and also the first book that was published, but really it was an entirely different book.
I agree with absolutely everything that's said here. My group of friends, writers, we help each other, and eventually we all published. But it's amazing what your friends, and you have to choose your friends well. You have to have honesty, but you have to have compassion. So your friends are there to help you grow, not to destroy you out of jealousy or out of this or that. So it's very important to choose that group well. Very important to write every day. At least I think so, because it's a groove that you get into. And the same thing happened to me with the first time that I published. Was very different than the first time I wrote the book. It also other person that really helped me were my publishers. You have to be open-minded. That's a landmine, because some publishers will tell you you need to do this, you need to do this and that, and 3/4 of it is very good advice, and 1/4 of it you have to say no in a very polite manner, because you, in that industry, you never play diva. You are very lucky. Luck, that was mentioned by everybody, plays a huge part in this place. I'll tell you the story of how my calling card online happened. So it happens. And I had a couple of interviews in the local newspaper, your town, your newspaper, the free newspaper you find everywhere. And a friend of mine saw that And I did not know that he was at a juncture of his life where he was thinking about starting a publishing house. I had no idea this friend of mine wanted to do that. So he called me up and said, "Why didn't you come to me?" Well, I did not know. So my advice is keep your network up. Really read every week something online about the industry. It's very important. This guy now has 3 different publishing houses. One in Quebec, 2 in BC, one in English, 2 in French. And sometimes he does translations. So if you happen to meet him and you have an English only project, he might not even publish you in English, but he might translate you because your topic interests him for his French groups. And the French and English are very different thinking. They have different ways of doing things. So that's one advice. The other advice I would say, use your background, not only your network of friends and your constant quest for knowledge, but use your background. If you are a person that is, I don't know, me, Greek or Jewish or Inuit or whatever, there are in your group newspapers, radios, TVs, and you should seek that out and seek your fellow help, the help of your fellow man, if I may say so. That was very useful to me. And as far as this book is concerned here, that's a story about that. It's a story of a boy that's from Acadian descent. And he has an adventure here on the West Coast. So who should I propose it to? The guy I know from here in BC? No, I only propose it to an Acadian house of printing in New Brunswick because of the topic. And that should be from now on, every day, you have to go through catalogs. You pick different people that have been printed and you go through the catalogs of that publisher, a daily exercise, and you make notes. Oh, that looks like my book on Dinosaur. I should go there. But if this company only do historical book, don't propose Tyrannosaur, even though it's very old. So that would be also an advice I would say. Look up at what's being published. What are they looking for? That would be my advice.
Wonderful. So everyone has shared incredible wisdom with you. I agree with all of it, which is rare. Usually at some point in one of these panels, I have to say, writing is not math, okay? You're not going to do input equals output. There's not right and wrong. There are all sorts of paths. There are all sorts of people. There are all sorts of books. One of the things you learn as an author in a very visceral way compared to how you might theoretically think of it before you're published is that people have completely, wildly different taste. And they will present it as this was good or bad. But that's not the case. There is no one perfect way. I cannot look at anyone's manuscript. So if that was going to be your question, I'm sorry. I can't look at it and tell you if you're ready for publishing. And even a top editor or publisher should not look at it and tell you if you are ready for publishing, period. They can tell you if it works for them, for their imprint, for their press, for their audience, and they're still just guessing. And they have said this in live jury trials now, so it's real. So take it with a grain of salt. We will probably all contradict each other at some point, and that is the way it should be. So it's all going to be different. That wasn't my advice. I'm just talking now. So my advice is try to figure out what it is that you care about. So do you just have that dream of being a published author and you're willing to spend the next 5, 10, 20, 30, 40 years getting in with your preferred publisher of choice? You're going to write and ditch as many books as it takes to get in there. That's a valid route. You can do that. Do you care about getting words out there, but it's not about the business for you? You just want readers to connect, or you want to get a message out to the world. Maybe you want to look at something like Wattpad, or quickly put something up on Kindle and don't spend as much time trying to figure out how you're going to make money off of it. There's a little bit of a trap to that, which is that in order to get visibility, you do have to hustle one way or another. You're going to have to hustle. But there are those different paths. And so for some of us, we've chosen more of a business route, going, we want to control our careers, to have control of our licenses, maybe to make more money over the long term rather than get that a little bit of money on the short term by licensing out a book. So lots of different paths. That's my main point. But on the business topic, if I can just throw in there, my number one resource is chriswrites.com, K-R-I-S, Writes, W-R-I-T-E-S.com, chriswrites.com. Fantastic. This is an author who I believe is in her 60s. She has been a ghostwriter, IP writer, so writing things like Star Wars, Star Trek. She has written her own books. She was a award-winning magazine editor. She now co-owns a publishing house with her husband, who's in his 70s. Between them, they have hundreds of books and I believe thousands of short stories. And I really value the insight that she brings in her blog to the business of writing in today's world. And it does sort of reference how things have changed. So I find that invaluable. There are many other resources out there. Please do your research and don't do what I do and assume that you can still get 7-figure advances for YA novels in the year of our Lord 2022. Okay, before I open it up to open questions, this is a few of the most common questions that I'm just going to give us a little head start on. So you can still ask these, but here's the answer. No, we don't make tons of money yet. So none of us are rich from our writing. Within Quill, which is about 150 authors and illustrators across BC, I don't know that there's anyone that's making a living solely off of their writing. Some are doing better than others. However, that doesn't mean that you can't make money writing. It's a long, hard path and involves luck. We can't send your work to our agents / editors / publishers, and we can't publish it ourselves. I'm sorry. We can't tell you if you're good enough. We covered that already. There's no universal standard. And with that, I'd like to open the floor to questions. So what can we help you with? What are you working on? What would you like to ask us? Please.
So I'll just repeat the question for people watching online. So the question was, with all of my rewrites, did the story still feel like mine? Absolutely, because these were all rewrites. Well, not all of them, but most of the rewrites happened before I sent it out to publishers. So I was learning. It was a learning process. I was rewriting. I was excited because actually rewriting is my favorite part of the writing process. I find the hardest is staring at that blank screen and getting the words down the first time. So I could see my writing getting better, and I was taking classes. I was working with writer in residence as part of my critique group. So I could feel it improving. I still did 3 rounds of edits with my publisher once it was accepted by Orca. But it was interesting though, because she said, oh yeah, this is really clean. We barely have to do any work. And then I got the document and it was like full of all the things that I needed to change. But it was lots of things to change, but it wasn't like rewrite the whole thing in a different point of view, which I think is what she meant. Like, it's just little things that need to change. So yes, I still felt like it was my work.
Does anyone else have stories about that they'd like to add? I feel like we all do.
I've had novels that I've completely rewritten several times. Unlike Sara, that's my least favorite part of writing. I would way rather stare at a blank page than go back to something I've previously written, which is actually kind of a trap for me. If I have a completed novel, rather than revising it or getting it to the finish line, I'd rather start a new novel, and then I fall into that trap of, hey, I didn't hit the publish button on this ever. It's been sitting on my computer for 10 years. That's kind of been my experience with that. Definitely rewriting, and starting to get better at it. It in my experience, that still does feel like my own story, but just a new way of looking at it, or trying to work out the problems in the story. As we've all alluded to, the craft of writing takes a lot of experience and a lot of learning. So as I've gone on my writing journey and learned more about the craft, it's been, maybe I should come back to that story I wrote 10 years ago that I haven't looked at in a long time maybe I should revisit it. And sometimes when I look at older writing that I've done, I don't recognize what I wrote 10 years ago. Like, did I really write? This is bad. I should rewrite this.
Okay, so when I sold my Lorenzo the Pizza Loving Lobster book, the book I submitted was completely different than what was published. The only thing that was basically the same was there was a lobster that loved pizza. So obviously, and when I sold it, the publisher was like, "Yeah, we really love the idea, but we want the story to change. We want the plot to change. We want there to be, you know, like a secondary character." So I added like a sea turtle friend. In the end, you know, I still love the first version of my book, but, you know, I also love the version that's published as well. So they're both good.
Not much to add.
No much? Okay. I have a lot to add. Um, so a few different thoughts about that. One of which, that recommendation I made earlier, Chris writes, that's Christine Catherine Rush. Her husband is Dean Wesley Smith, and he writes without rewriting. Hugely successful. He's inspired by the pulp fiction era. And something that's worth understanding is how much publishing has changed, not just in the last 5, 10, 20 years, which it has a lot, but over the course of the last century. The amount of editing that was happening, actually I've been hearing that it's happening a little bit less now because publishers don't want to make the investment. It sort of peaked, I believe, from the 80s into maybe early 2000s, and then it's been dropping again. It used to be fairly common, especially if you want to make money writing. You write it out, probably you type it out on a typewriter, mail that one copy off, and hope that it doesn't get lost in the mail. And then, you know, that publisher is maybe going to make some corrections to your typos, and that's the story. I have not successfully done a novel in one take. I have had short stories that have been published accepted in just one take. So I think that would be hard for me to kind of keep everything straight on that scale. But as we're talking about rewriting, transformation, editors, publishers giving you notes, you are the author or illustrator. You are the artist. This is your creative voice, and that is something to be protected. So especially when you're starting out, you don't necessarily have the taste, have the insight, and that's something that will develop. But if you feel really strongly about something, you want to fight for it, do that. Because you're the one who's going to have to live with your name on that book. I know that sounds a little bit severe. So on the other side of it, this was my first book. I did write a few as like a teenager, young adult. Yeah, enough said about that. So, but this, I hired a good, what we call a developmental editor, who helped me work through character, plot, structure, all of those things. It was like an MBA based on one book in a shorter period of time. It was great. This is a very different book than it started out with. I do feel a bit sad about the book that I started out with, but there are choices that you make in order to connect with readers, in order to fit into a genre, into a market. If you value working with a publisher, that's part of your choice between artistic integrity, marketability. If I want to work with them, there are going to be things that they're going to negotiate with and things that they won't. And so each of you has to make that choice individually. And I actually make it for each book. So there are books that I would consider taking to a publisher. YA and adult is currently not something that I would consider taking to a publisher. So yeah, it can be tough.
I just wanted to say that I totally agree and about wanting, like, deciding what you want to fight for, but I can say that working with traditional publishers, they're really good at what they do for the most part. And most of the things that they've asked me to change, I can see why it's been better in the end. And an example of something I kind of fought for and regretted was the title Jake Reynolds' Chicken or Eagle. We had a really hard time coming. That was my title. They wanted to change it. I didn't agree with the title that they had suggested because I didn't think it captured the book enough. But now I can see that that's a really long title and it's hard to remember and it's got a lot of punctuation. And so I should have listened to them. I should have fought and said, okay, let's find a third option if we don't agree on that. And then these books, the Slug Days series, they asked me, I submitted it, the Slug Days, as a picture book, and they asked me to rewrite it as a chapter book. And that was 100% the right decision. This has captured the right market where the picture book didn't.
I think a good thing to add to that is we're talking about children's publishing right now, and there are going to be more guidelines out there, especially I think the younger that you go. So as you get into YA, and especially that older YA, it's moving into a lot more flexibility about what can go in that book. For younger children, there tend to be more expectations around content. So, you're not going to have a binge drinking dinosaur in your picture book and market it to 5-year-olds. That's not going to happen. So in that sense, some of the feedback that you're going to get, you might not like, but it might be necessary to fit in the category. Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Do we have another question? Oh, all over the place. Okay, let's go to that side. No one here has an agent. Do you? Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Most quillers actually don't, but we'll let Sara take that. The question was about agents. Sorry, Claire.
Yeah, so I have an agent. He's amazing. He's awesome. I queried him after I had another agent that didn't work out so well. And he's been amazing. He's really great because some agents are just all about selling your work, but he's really about helping me create the story. So we do a lot of back and forth. Like I'll just, email him and be like, what do you think of this idea? And he's like, okay, it's good. We can switch it here. But oh my gosh, his edits are amazing. And he only takes 15% of the book that I sell, and he usually gets more than that than what I ask. So it's completely worth it. And I'm very pro agent because they look out for you when you sell your book.
Thanks, Claire. That's great feedback. This is where we get into contradiction. So not all agents have your best interests in heart. Do your research as much as possible. Be aware that agents are not licensed for what they do in a legal business sense. They're not like lawyers. They don't have a requirement to protect your best interests. They definitely have stolen funds in the past. So this is a eyes wide open. You can hire IP lawyers to help you work on contracts, and you just pay them their rate, and that's an option going forward. You do not need agents to publish. However, if you want to get in one of the bigger, we say usually big 5 publishers, that's they don't take open submission, like hardly at all. So you're going to need an agent to get in those doors if that's what you want. So again, your choice is about what you care about, and please learn the business and know how to protect yourselves.
Am I wrong in thinking that an agent is a very American thing? Because their market is so big and they have so much more.
There are agents in Canada and all over the place, and they do work with the American publishers, but traditionally it's one of those like 3 martini lunches with the publishers, and they all work in New York in the same like little zone. So it's something that has been changing. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Oh, and also, sorry, I'll just add, there are different focuses of agents. So some of them will have that editorial input. They'll want to work with you on the project, give you feedback about what's hot in the market right now, what they think they can sell. Others might be more focused on like, they just go for the throat sharks. They want to get as much money as possible because they work on commission as you do. So they get a portion of what you sell in terms of the book. It's in their best interest to sell more, except that it's also in their interest to keep the publisher, the editor happy, because if they have lots of clients and they sell to the editor, so there's a little bit of conflict of interest in there as well. Lots to consider.
Can I just say, part of the choice of, you can go down one route, agent, direct solicitation of publisher, or self-publish. For me, for my personal journey, the reason I chose to self-publish is because it seemed like I was just investing a lot of time in sending out all these queries to agents, waiting months and months and months for them to request a manuscript or to just not reply. Same thing with publishers. You spend a lot of time querying. They all have very specific things that they want to see. So you're tailoring each of those, writing specific query letters, and then maybe not hearing back. For me, it was, I can get my book into my readers' hands way quicker through self-publishing. Not that that's going to be the best choice for everyone, but for me, that was the reason I didn't go down the agent route.
Yeah, all good feedback. Yes.
I'm just curious how you do your distribution.
That's a great question. So a lot of book sales for me are online, so people can purchase through Amazon directly, and then Amazon prints those books and ships them directly to my readers. Then I also do bulk orders to my home, and then I go around personally and drop them off at bookstores. So I'm actually reaching out to Chapters, indie bookstores, talking to each of the managers and seeing if they will stock my books in their stores. Luckily, I have a partner who does all of the outreach for that because I work 70 hours a week at my day job. So I don't really have time to do that on my own, but Stephen does a lot of the reaching out to people and making those connections. So distribution is something that we kind of self-manage.
Yeah, there's a lot of options there as the other mostly indie in the room. I do print on demand. I have not done a bulk order. I just haven't needed to. I've got more books than I can get around to selling printed in my closet anyways. And the vast majority of my sales are ebook online. However, again, I write for that upper YA category mostly. And so that's older teens to adults. They're more comfortable with ebooks. So it's less of an issue. If you're writing for youngers, you will have kind of a different business model and path. And I have seen people that really put a lot of effort into getting their books into distribution networks. So that's often something you can do. If you're not using a print on demand like Ingram, Spark, or KDP, you're going to need to usually pay the distributor something. So you have to be able to move enough units to make it worthwhile for you to pay them. And that means sort of a big promotional marketing push, probably some touring, connecting with schools. So it's doable. There are people that have done very well with this. However, that is another path that you have to decide if you're up for or not. Okay, we'll take one from online. One from online.
Here's a question from Alderson. For those who have published independently, how have you found getting it into stores, or is that? I know you covered that briefly, but I think that's a question generally.
That's a good related one. So how have we handled getting it into stores? I mostly have not. I sort of looked into it and went, there's not going to be much point. I don't really I'm not that emotionally invested in seeing it on shelves. What I do care about more is getting into library systems and schools, which is hard to do. It takes a concerted effort. It's not something I have pursued as much as I would like to. However, it can be done. And I think, Bryce, do you want to talk a little bit more to that?
Yeah, so I've got several books in several libraries. Actually, it was, again, a lot of that was my co-author has done a lot of the reaching out to, are you able to speak to that?
We have a special guest joining us, everyone.
I'm so nervous. Okay, sorry, what was the question again?
So just about how we were able to get our books into libraries, for example.
Oh, okay. It was a lot of work to do. It was a lot of emailing. It was a lot of phone calling. You kind of really have to go also into libraries and into stores and kind of make that connection. You can't really just send an email and just expect your books to get in. A lot of people think that you can do that. I mean, you can try, and again, it's luck, like the panelist said. Making that connection, if you have, grandchildren or nieces or nephews, going to the schools and introducing yourself to the librarians and kind of making that connection.
Yeah, for us, it's all been about networking, making connections. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's Stephen Kothler, everyone. So it's something good to think about if that's a direction that you want to go is people need a reason to buy your books. So it's nice to think that if it's on the shelf, they'll pick it up and you'll build some momentum that way. It's not terribly realistic. Even the big publishers, they've got that bookstore space, they've got in the libraries, but they are doing, hopefully, big promotional pushes to get that visibility out there so that people know about it. And so how are you going to make it exciting for schools, for libraries, for stores to bring you in? It might be that you're doing a ton of speaking, that you're famous in the local community. For schools and libraries specifically, if you can get your book reviewed by one of the major outlets, we're talking School Library Journal maybe, Kirkus, and they actually give you a good review. And because you're indie, you probably have to pay quite a lot for it. But if you have that, then that's something that increases the likelihood. So I have not bothered with that on my upper YA titles. If I chose to indie publish for a younger book, that would be something that I'd seriously consider, is what do I need to invest, what do I need to chase in order to be appealing to this market? Because if you can get into school distribution, public library distribution in a big way, like there are children's publishers in Canada that's all they focus on. They don't even focus on retail sales. They just try to get their books into schools, and they make money doing it. There are a lot of schools. Yeah, great questions. Another one. Okay, right in the back.
Just for context, I'm interested in writing middle grade or upper middle grade, so roughly ages 10 to 14. In terms of structure, plot points, pacing, chapter lengths, all those kind of things, are there any particular resources that you found to be really helpful, be it books or websites, people?
Awesome. So the question was about structure. What are the resources in terms of learning, and specifically for middle grade, upper middle grade? Well, I mean, I hired an editor that taught me all of that stuff, so I skipped the line a bit. But a good book that I found is, oh my goodness. No, for the structure, not for where to submit it. I'm going to have to get back to you on that. I have one. I know it. I just cannot remember it, but there are some. Anyone else have good resources on structure, how to structure a book for the market? Because it's a great question. It's actually very important, especially if you want into traditional publishing. They're fairly consistent about that. So you're probably talking a 3-act structure with 4 main beats. So you're splitting it in half. And I teach creative writing, so I do this a lot. You're going to have your first third, and then the middle part is going to be about half the length of the book, and then the ending is another quarter. And so you're going to have your character starting out on their adventure, something interrupts their regular life. That's getting, yeah. Hero's journey is a little bit more complex, but that's the kind of thing we're talking about. I haven't read it, but I've heard Save the Cat for novels is a great resource. And yeah, maybe come find me afterwards, because I'm sure I have a picture of the book I use on my phone. I just cannot remember it at the moment. I can picture it in my mind.
Some online resources that are really good, kidlit411.com, I think. They it's very well organized by genre and subject and everything, and they just have like a lot of good information on there, and like all these links to different websites. So I highly recommend that website, kidlit411.
Jane Friedman is another one that's very well used and liked. I don't personally use it a lot, but I know a lot of people that love it. janefriedman.com.
Yeah, I'm still trying to rack my brain. There's one that's on the tip of my tongue, but I'll have to get back to you.
Yeah, sorry, we we have books, we just don't know what they're called. Anyone else? Give us an easy one. Yeah.
Going back to like really like kids skills, like inspiration, know what kids are looking for.
Can I answer that?
Go for it.
Absolutely. I think research, that is a huge part of your research if you're wanting to write for kids, is you should be reading for kids. So the advice that was given to me is that you should read 100 books in whatever genre you're writing in. So if you're writing picture books, that's a lot less time consuming than if you're writing YA novels. I'm a teacher librarian, so it wasn't really a hard sell for me. I'm already doing it, but it's so important, and it's really important to not just read the books that you loved in your childhood. That is a good thing to do too, because it's what you're drawn to. But you also, if you're looking to publish, you need to be looking at how are books crafted today, because that's very different, especially depending on your age. Books that were written when I was a kid are very different than the books that are being published today.
Yeah, so I write dinosaur books. I didn't really do any market research for that. I just kind of thought kids like dinosaurs. I happen to have had some success with that. But normally, yeah, it's like with my adult writing and YA writing, it's a lot of just read a lot, and trends, especially in YA, I've found shift so quickly. So you need to read a lot, and you need to read current if you're wanting to do market research. Read whatever's been very recently published, I think.
Yeah, that's true for both paths. So if you're trying to get a agent or an editor, one of the things they're going to ask for is comp titles, comparative. So what other books already exist in the market that are like yours? Hopefully they're popular because they want to see that your book will sell. There's a lot of debate about whether this is a good way to run a business or to do artistic creation. However, that's just the way it is. So they're usually looking for books in the last 2 years, maybe up to 5 years for that. Doesn't mean that you can only write things that are inspired by what's current, but you should know it. And then getting into the genre, the age group category, there are things that are going to be fairly consistent. So romance writers have this down. They know every beat that's got to happen. They know what the tropes are for their very specific niche subgenre. They make a lot of money, so they study how to do this, but it's pretty much true for every genre, subgenre, age group, that there are things that are going to be expected. So dinosaur books have got to have dinosaurs. Maybe they'll have some like threat domination, like are there herbivores and carnivores, and is there tension between them? That might be a genre expectation. You've got horror, you're probably going to have some sort of creatures, probably not too bloody or deadly given the age group, but maybe a little bit more violence than you'd see in like a fluffy rom-com. I don't know. So definitely something to look into. I did come up with an answer for that previous question. So The Plot Whisperer by Martha Alderson is one that I've liked. It gets a little woo-woo, kind of new agey, because it talks about how your character's journey is like your journey through life, and you're facing challenges, and like grain of salt, take what you want from it, but it does cover all the major beats. So I found that helpful. Plot Whisperer by Martha Alderson. Yeah, another question?
For illustration books, what's your process like? Like, do you write everything first, and then you use illustrations to match what you've written? Do you sketch it out and relay that info to your illustrator? Then if you're illustrating yourself, like what you use, like to use software, hardware, and
Okay,
Sorry,
so
just to restate the question. So he's asking about illustration. How do you do it? What are the tools? What's the process? And Claire, as our illustrator, will answer.
yeah, so so it's a little bit different between if I am also the author or just the illustrator. So with my Lorenzo book, I was also the author, and the process, I mostly do my writing first. I might do like a sketch or two, but I really like to get the story down. And then from there, I do something that's called pagination, and I kind of figure out what text is going to go on what page, because in a picture book, it's usually 32 pages. That includes the cover and the back. And from there, I do these really small sketches. They're almost like business card size of what each page is going to look like. That I do in pencil, just so, because if you work digitally, it's so easy to get caught in the details. So that's just to get mostly like the compositions on each page. And then from there, I scan those into my computer, I blow them up, and then I do the sketches. I work digitally. I mostly work in Photoshop. A lot of illustrators these days, they just work in Procreate. It's a lot cheaper. I wish I could. I'm just used to Photoshop, and I like to work in a million layers. And if I'm just illustrating a book, I get the text again, and then I paginate it. For some of my books, my editor had already paginated it for me, be like, this goes on this page, this goes on that page. And yeah, from there, it's the same process. I do small thumbnails, scan them in, work on sketches, and then go to final art.
Hot tip for anyone interested in illustrating. Children's graphic novels are a really buzzy category right now. There's much more interest than there is supply. So that might be something to look into if you can draw. Or if you're interested, you can also pair up. You can do the writing part and have someone come in as the illustrator. Generally with picture books, if you're the writer, you don't find your illustrator, the publisher finds it, unless you're going indie. With graphic novels, we're seeing a mixture of submission calls. So some publishers do prefer that you team up beforehand, actually create that book together. In which case, if you can't sell it, I would highly suggest self-publishing it, because you're never going to get that money back otherwise. So there's a few different routes to that. We are getting near the end of our time. So actually what I'm going to do is the official closing statement, just so we kind of wrap everything up nicely for the camera. We do have a little bit of time before the next session, so if you guys want to keep asking us questions, you can. And we also have a table just out in the lobby, so you can follow us there if we need to clear the room. And we're happy to answer more questions. But before we do that, I just want to thank our panelists for taking the time to share their experience, and in some cases driving such a long way to do it for us. If you would like to purchase any of the books that you've heard about today, also at any other sessions during this festival, you can visit our official bookseller, Iron Dog Books. I believe they have a table out in the lobby, I think also online. And then our Quill BC table is just by the down side of the escalator on your way out. You can find books by pretty much everyone here there as well. They'd be happy to sign for you. Thanks as well to the staff and volunteers of Word Vancouver for making this possible. If you'd like to support the festival itself, you can donate or bid in the silent auction at wordvancouver.ca. Plenty more events happening today. I believe we're going till 8 p.m. So stick around as long as you can. Check out the program. Great resources. And while we're at it, pick up some adorable free bookmarks. Our Quill table has these great illustrated bookmarks. Feel free to take a few. Enter our giveaway. We also have a little kids book basket. So that is the plug for us, for Word. That officially concludes this panel. However, if we have more questions, we could keep going for a few minutes. Okay. Yeah, if anyone has questions, you can yell them out or put your hands up, or you can like make for the door if you've got to hike out too. We're good either way. Yeah.
Oh, are we still doing that, the mic thing? Or no? Okay. So I found my critique group through the Society of Children's Books Writers and Illustrators. There's local chapters. I know there's one here in Vancouver, and you just connect with people there. They usually have some events going on every month or so, and you can ask around. I know when I joined mine, it was when I lived in another city, and they had this like Google spreadsheet that said like, are you looking for a critique group? Put your info down, and maybe you can find somebody else on the spreadsheet to get together. But that's how I found my critique group.
Yeah, so that's Squibby. Quill is only post-published, so it's a little bit different, but Squibby does take pre-published, so you can be something like an associate member with them and access their resources. So that's a great one. Your local library branch, you can check on the wall or ask, they might have something. And then Facebook, weirdly enough, I know it's not good for much, but for writing communities, there's actually great resources in the groups section where you can join, and it'll be about a specific topic. So you kind of just like search for keywords, maybe what age group plus critique, and you might find something there.
I think Kidlit 411 also has critique groups that you can find.
Mm-hmm.
Also, if you ever attend a festival, like I'm involved with the Whistler Writers Festival, and we have a writer in residence that comes, and often the writer in residence is sort of adjunct to the festival. It happens separately, but often there's a critique group that forms out of the people that have been part of that course. My first critique group that I joined was because I took a class at the time, it was Malaspina University, but now it's Vancouver Island University. It was an online class. 3 or 4 of us created an online critique group out of that. The one that I'm part of in Whistler, our organizer put a note in the paper looking for writers, and we grew out of that, and we've been going for 20 years. Mm-hmm. And also, that group is not all children's writers. So you don't have to be specific to children's writers to have your critique group.
I'm going to play the sponsorship video again now.
Yeah.
Please feel free to note out in the chat.
Okay.
Another 10 minutes.
Sure, sounds good. Also on the subject of critique groups,